Right, I got some filming to do today, and actually the whole week. I'm probably gonna have to do at least one set of two a day, really, for this whole week. Anyways, for those who don't know why I've been gone for a while, it's been because I had to deal with my Excel. See, as you know, at least the basics, Excel is a computer program, which means you need to be signed in. Yet, for some reason, I still don't know why, my Excel wasn't working. Neither was my Word, because they forced me to log in when, even after I typed in everything, it still said the internet wasn't going, when it quite literally was, and I could do assignments with it. Regardless of my complaining, let's get into the video. And sorry about the noise, because apparently the trains can't help but make it. Anyways, this may be a bit random, at least to most people, but let's talk about the Haber-Bosch process and fertilizer in general. See, the Haber-Bosch process was a very important way to create fertilizer because it was a way for creating artificial ammonia. You take hydrogen and nitrogen and put them under a specific temperature, I believe 400 to 450 degrees Celsius, with a certain amount of pressure, and you create artificial ammonia in such a way. This ammonia, being nitrogen rich as it is, was able to be used to help fertilize the soil. This process, among others, revolutionized the creation of fertilizer. And this is important because the initial problem that a lot of people found when it came to feed is as the population grows, you need more food. Well, how do you feed these people? You grow more. But you can't devote all your land to agriculture. That's just not how it works. There are limits. And there are limits to how many people you can realistically put in one place. Jeez, people are loud. Regardless, back to the point. Hold on a second. Jeez. It's 8 freaking o'clock here. Well, if we're going by 20-hour time, 24-hour, it's 20, but still. Back to the point and why it's notable. There's only so much food you can grow within a certain span of area. And as one might guess, land is rather limited for people. Couple that with the people you need working that land, and you can naturally see the problem. You need more people to work the land, but the more people you have, the more food you need, and so it's a continuous cycle. Fertilizer, among other things, helped deal with this problem by allowing one to basically refertilize the soil, make the crops grow better, and just in greater quantities, and through such, you could produce more. Greater surplus, less land needed, more ability to feed the people. Our Bosch process was a big step forward for that because it allowed for us to not have to rely on natural sources of ammonia. Like, for example, bird poop, which, if you didn't know, that was a real thing. In fact, a big reason why a lot of islands are now colonized by the United States, UK, and France was for bird poop. Yes, they're called guano islands. It was a real thing. So enjoy that the next time you think about a potato. Someone used to grow those with bird poop. And this was particularly important for the British and Thomas Malthus and his ideas in the first place. See, the idea of the Malthusians was that people produce kids exponentially, so population growth goes like this. But food growth goes like this, in a linear way. This causes a problem. If it's linear, that food growth continues to go in such a manner, while population grows exponentially, at a certain point, these have to intersect. And at that point, you can sustain only that population. That is the limit. If you go higher, you're going to face mass starvation. And if the natural resources you use to sustain that population go down, well, then the starvation area increases. Artificial ammonia, among other things, was a way to solve that. The Green Revolution, if you didn't know, was also a way to solve this later on, with GMOs. And so, this makes fertilizer very important for mass agriculture, which is required to sustain our population as it is, 8 billion in all. And so any plan to replace them must overcome this reality and be as efficient, or even more efficient, than the current ones used. And they have to be created in such a way as to be affordable. It doesn't matter if you have a better fertilizer if you can't produce it at scale. If you only produce enough fertilizer to, say, feed 100,000 people. Sure, useful for those 100,000. Everyone else, flatly useless. You may be able to stretch it a bit, but for those other people who can't get their food from there, well, that doesn't mean anything if you're taking away their chemical fertilizers at the same time because you deem it environmentally damaging, which, to be fair, they aren't exactly good for the environment most of the time. And so, naturally, that creates issues. Another big thing that we're noticing is that fertilizers should really be created by the countries that use them, because that prevents food shortages. It's good to have some level of vertical integration within a country. Yes, specialization helps, but think about it from a practical perspective. Food is the bedrock for any economy. You can't feed people? Freak, you can't do anything. And so, you naturally need people to have food. Not everyone can produce enough for themselves. The United States is lucky it can, but for others it can't. They can't, rather. And so they need to import food. But for those that can, they should be able to sustain themselves. Because logically, guess who people are going to import from? Those countries. If you're Japan, where are you going to buy food from? Taiwan? They can't produce enough food for their own people either. No, you're going to go to the US. You're going to go maybe to India, China. Those who can. And I say China, PRC specifically. Technically, Taiwan and China are both the Republic of China and the People's Republic of China, respectively, and claim each other as property. Frankly, there's only one that I respect, and it's not the one controlling Manchuria. But, having said that, fertilizer is a big thing for this because, well, the PRC, the United States, etc., in order to produce such food, and of course, any country that's trying to increase their agriculture, needs that fertilizer. And so if they're not producing it themselves, well then that creates a lot of issues. Because you're reliant on foreigners who can cut it off, thus allowing for effective starvation and food shortages, which is an incredible problem. And it's worse. Think about it. If the United States, let's say, doesn't have enough fertilizer to produce food, it isn't just US citizens that'll feel it. Anyone who imports food from the United States will feel it. The Japanese, South Koreans, etc. Those who import food to sustain their larger populations without the arable land necessary to maintain their populations will naturally struggle. And so, when it comes to the future, actually thinking about this logically, in the future, we need people to be able to sustain their own populations. Bare minimum, there must be an equilibrium that we can sustain reasonably for a decent period, until eventually technology catches up and we can sustain a larger population. And so to do that, having fertilizers in the countries that use them is vastly important. It means one strait or one territory being blockaded or stopped won't prevent the food from flowing, completely at least. And while more efficient fertilizers should be invented, and natural ways should be pursued for the sake of preserving the environment, which, remember, fertilizer and plants that use said fertilizer rely on the environment to at least be somewhat functional. In such cases, and those would be most cases, it is better to have something that sustains the environment, maintains equilibrium. But you can't just do a mass switch. That's the thing. You can't just say, let's just abandon these chemical fertilizers and go to this new solution if it can't be produced at scale. If there's a way, legitimately, to replace chemical fertilizers, get it at scale. Get it able to be a substitute for those situations, for those farms. Make it cheap, make it efficient, and make it in large enough quantities that you can reasonably sustain the population. Because otherwise, it may help some, but it won't help everyone. And so, with the Haber-Bosch process, always remember, innovation can absolutely allow for the sustaining of things that we otherwise could not. This population that we currently have, 300 million in the United States, over 1.4 billion in both India and China on their own as separate countries, and much more around the world. All that is only possible because of the Haber-Bosch process, because of the ability to create these fertilizers and sustain such mass production of food. Given that, however we go forwards, whether we truly do find an eco-friendly way to produce fertilizer and use it, or we're stuck using chemicals for a long time, whatever the case, we gotta remember, in order to sustain things, we need those innovations that allow it. We need to focus on what allows us to do the things we need and maintain them, or innovate upon them to make them better, so that we can actually keep this moving forwards. That'll be all. Thank you for watching.